This video series has laid out an argument that democracy in the United States is dying, and that Trump and MAGA are similar to the early years of Hitler and the Nazis. The first video also clarified that Trump is more like modern dictators, but Hitler was chosen for this comparison for the reasons given in that video. The first video in this series also sets out some important context. The qualifiers it includes, shown here, apply to all of the videos in the series. Trump admires dictators. This is common knowledge, and it's become obvious to anyone who's paying attention that the Trump regime is moving fast to turn the US into a failed democracy. Trump has literally destroyed much of the White House. That's a sadly fitting metaphor for what he's doing to the United States of America. But is Trump Hitler? Not really. Despite Trump's admiration of Hitler, Trump lacks the vision and conviction that Hitler had. Trump always got anything and everything he wanted and never mentally matured. Trump is, in many ways, just a bully that's now an overgrown man-child with no impulse control. He's still dangerous, to be clear, not least of which because he's the President of the United States, with the immense, too much, power that includes. But money itself provides a lot of power, and he has now, at least, a lot of money. But even if Trump has no interest in anything but himself, he's still surrounded by idealistic people. Even Hitler didn't do it alone. To their ends, Trump is very much a useful idiot, gleefully carrying out the policy wishes of Christian nationalists and billionaires that got him elected. Russell Vought and Stephen Miller are two of these people heavily steering Trump's policies. Vought and Miller do have vision and conviction. They are fanatically idealistic about turning the United States into a horror show of what it was meant to be. And Trump, knowingly and unknowingly, carries out their dark desires. Russell Vought is a co-author of Project 2025. Vought has been working quietly in the shadows for decades, influencing right-wing politicians and pushing them to turn the United States into a Christian nationalist theocracy. Trump has put him in charge of the United States Budget Office. Now he's in a position to push his agenda directly. Gutting the U.S. government and purging career experts that would resist its destruction is his fever dream come true. And the shutdown that we're currently in couldn't be more perfect for fulfilling his desires. Stephen Miller is Trump's policy advisor in the White House. He has been a craven ghoul his entire adult life. He's filled with hate, white nationalism, and seems to have a fetish for oppressing immigrants and even Americans generally, even though his family are immigrants. ICE has become Stephen Miller's modern-day Gestapo. These two not-so-secret puppet masters are supported by Kristi Noem, Pete Hegseth, Pam Bondi, RFK Jr., the rest of the grifters and loyalists that are helping to tear the United States apart for their own personal gains. So, no, Trump is not Hitler, but Trump is a fascist authoritarian, and he's surrounded by Nazi-like extremists working to implement their dystopian views for America. So what about MAGA? Are MAGA politicians or supporters Nazis? Sadly, yes, MAGA politicians are fully supporting a fascist takeover of the United States, just like Nazi politicians supported the fascist takeover of Germany. And MAGA supporters share considerable similarities with Nazi supporters, as this series has discussed. Like Germany a century ago, a sizable minority of the United States population agrees with white nationalism and authoritarianism. But as this video series has also clarified, this comparison has been made with the early years of the Nazi Party. Trump and MAGA are not being compared to the Nazis' infamous final years. But this distinction begs the question, If Trump and MAGA leadership were able to break the US Democratic government and operate without any controls, like the Nazis did in Germany, would Trump and MAGA advance to a similar horrific state as Hitler and the Nazis did? Most Americans would like to think it could never happen here, and it probably wouldn't. But don't be so sure that it can't. As has been noted in this series, the Nazis themselves in the early years were not like the Nazis of infamy either. They grew increasingly bolder and increasingly more depraved with each action that they got away with. And it's easier to get there than you might think, both at the group level and at the individual level. At the group level, it takes a shockingly small number of people truly dedicated to evil, while the majority does nothing, for truly horrific acts to occur. The Nazis murdered over 17 million people altogether. But the Holocaust specifically was carried out by around 500,000 Nazis, and most of those were only indirectly involved in things like the bureaucracy of the operations. Only around 200,000 Nazis were directly involved in operations of the camps. That was less than 1% of the German population at the time. But with varying levels of support from millions, and the millions more who simply said nothing, that small fraction was all it took. At the individual level, we need to beware of the banality of evil. This is the alarming complacency shown by otherwise normal people who are willing to participate in the most horrific acts. Their inherently hateful views seem to make it easy for them to align with the dehumanization of the projected enemy. They conform to the expectations of their group, internalize their justifications for doing what they do, they obey without question, and they don't think outside of that framework. If asked if they're good people, they would say yes, of course they're good people. But if questioned about their actions, their human morality that should be there is replaced with groupthink talking points, and they insist that they were just doing their job. This is the banality of evil. The authoritarian behaviors we've seen so far and the banality of evil would indicate that yes, in fact, Trump and MAGA could, theoretically, advance to the horrific levels of the Nazis more easily than we might want to admit, if their power and hate grew unchecked. We no longer have to wonder how Germans could have allowed such things. We're seeing how such things can happen in real time. An essential requirement necessary to take complete control and lock in an emerging dictatorship is to invent an excuse to strip away civil rights and impose military occupation. And, like Hitler, Trump is doing this too. He, Miller, Noam, and others are inventing the boogeyman of violent criminal immigrants and Antifa. Despite their lies, immigrants are overwhelmingly law-abiding. And Antifa is not an organization. Antifa is literally just short for anti-fascism. That's the idea of opposing fascism, and it's been around since fascism was created. We should all be Antifa. This same support structure from the closest fervent supporters to the edge enablers also existed in Nazi Germany. The majority of people didn't support Hitler. The majority of people don't support Trump. Both of them had only around 1/3 of the population's support, and they just ran over the rest. But the United States in the 2020s has benefits that 1930s Germany didn't have. The biggest one might be a more robust constitution, though that's being tested like never before, and it'll only be as strong as the people's willingness to defend it. A big practical difference is the internet and the ability to quickly know what's going on. Hitler and the Nazis did most of their work in secret and kept the German people in the dark about all of the worst of their doings until the very end. By contrast, most of what Trump or his administration does is known by the US people and the world soon after. It's not perfect, of course. There are still people being disappeared that have little or no paper trail. But they don't get away with near as much as the Nazis did. Another important difference is that Hitler's leaders were on average more competent than the bumbling idiots of Trump's regime. Nevertheless, democracies are fragile. It won't take much to destroy the United States of America and all that it stands for. All that it'll take is a minority of wrong-minded citizens and a larger majority who stand by and let it happen. Fortunately, people are standing up in the largest protests in American history to show that they are not going to be complicit in this act. But even if Trump's worst impulses can be withstood for the 4 years of his term, the damage he's doing will change America forever. The question is how? Will he erode basic institutions and fundamental values and push America increasingly toward authoritarianism and a loss of all that America stands for? Or will his draconian administration be stopped as people fight for a renewed focus on moral government, the rule of law, equity, and freedom for all? It's encouraging to see the pushback against Trump, not only from judges respecting the rule of law, but from everyday citizens and increasingly from governors and members of Congress saying this situation is out of hand. Democracy dies in silence. Tyranny must be resisted. Raise your voice. Call or write to your congresspersons and let them know how they should be representing you. Do not obey in advance. Do not let fear silence you. The Trump regime has not yet gained real power. As terrible as some of their behavior is, it's mostly an act right now. And despite the damage that's being caused, it's being fought with success. If we don't stop them, they will crush democracy and gain real power. And if that happens, the United States may never recover. In the future, history will tell the story that we're currently living. Which side do you want it remembered that you were on? Thanks for watching. Subscribe to sharpen the way you might think.